Welcome to Shattering Myths. This program is devoted to the most important and to the fastest growing segment of our society. To those who have finally awakened, who know that the world's, including America's, political, religious, media, military, and economic institutions are corrupt, that they are counterproductive, they can't be fixed. Our mission here is to look behind the headlines, to know who is working against our interest, to understand what they're doing, to know why they are doing so. Because ultimately exposing and condemning errant and treacherous schemes isn't hateful, it's caring, and it's the single most important thing we can do. In our concluding hour, we're going to turn to evidence and reason once again, and we're going to use it to explore the Torah, which means teaching, not law, because its covenant provides the only reliable answer for you and your family. Our phone number, and we've had excellent participation in these last few shows, is toll-free. It's 877-300-7645. You're invited to call at any time over the next 3 hours. This is going to be a robust show today. We'll begin in Washington, D.C. Most of the articles read as follows. It started out like dozens of other interviews after Tuesday night's State of the Union address. And this one reads inaccurately. It says, but when New York One's reporter, Mike Scotto, decided to press Michael Grimm on his personal campaign finances, the Republican congressman abruptly ended the interview. This suggests that the New York One reporter, Mike Scotto, approached Michael Grimm and caught him off guard. That is not true. Michael Grimm is the only Republican congressman from New York City. He approached New York One. He wanted them to interview him. It's only about the president's speech, thank you, Grimm said before walking off camera. But that wasn't the end of it. Yes, in Grimm's world, the media can only ask questions about what the politician wants to say. Any question regarding anything that the politician doesn't want to talk about is inappropriate. Now, it's not the first time that a politician has walked out during a live interview. It's foolish, inappropriate, cowardly. It shows that you're hiding something because you're afraid to answer the questions. It also shows that there's substance to the federal investigation of this congressman. You see, it appears that he has taken donations that grossly exceed the maximum limits from any individual, and that he has solicited foreign campaign donations. But it's what happened next that is shocking, even to the most jaded observers of American politics. After the New York One, which is a cable news media group in the New York area, after Scotto returns to his report, now he's broadcasting after the State of the Union address. He was doing this when Representative Grimm approached him. Grimm, who is a former FBI agent and a former U.S. Marine, stormed back into the camera frame, and he whispered a threat to the reporter. He said, "I'll break you in half." He then threatened to throw the journalist over a balcony inside the U.S. Congress, which, had he done so, would have killed him. It's illegal. The threat of physical assault against an individual who is not threatening you physically is illegal in this country, and it's a felony. If America was genuinely just, this politician would have been arrested. He would be in jail now. He would be facing charges of criminal assault. You cannot threaten to break someone in half. You cannot threaten to throw someone over a balcony. That is a serious crime. Although the audio was somewhat muted, New York One employees said that Grimm said, "Let me be clear to you. You ever do that to me again, and I will throw you off this balcony." Now, the reporter said, "I just wanted you to know, it's to ask you. After all, it's a valid question." Stoto says, clearly taken aback by Grimm's sudden confrontational style. No, Grimm says, "You're not man enough. You're not man enough. I'll break you in half like a boy." Wow. As a congressman, Grimm obviously thinks that he is the government and that he's empowered over the people. As an FBI agent, he thinks that he's the authorized enforcer of the government's will. As a Marine, he recognizes that he was trained to kill those who oppose the government's will. He represents everything that is wrong with this country and its affinity for its FBI and its affinity for its Marines and its affinity for its Congress, its elected politicians. Grimm was first elected to office in the 2010 midterm elections. He was unapologetic after the interview, issuing a statement that was carried by the New York Daily News. It reads, I was doing NY1 a favor by rushing to do their interview first in lieu of several other requests. He wasn't requested to interview with New York One. He came to them. He wanted to be interviewed. But here's this egomaniac who says that he was doing NY1 a favor. What, by threatening to kill its reporter? The reporter knew that I was in a hurry and was only there to comment on the State of the Union, but insisted on taking a disrespectful and cheap shot at the end of the interview because I did not have time to speak off topic, end quote. Egomaniacal. The problem with politicians. It's a problem with Marines. And I know many of my close friends, many listening to this program, are former Marines. But they indoctrinate Marines to be egotistical. They train Marines to kill. Politicians participate in what I call the arena of egos. When you run for public office, you're running to promote your own brand, your own ego. I was doing New York One a favor. It's a cheap shot. Cheap shot to ask about a federal investigation on campaign fraud. Mr. Grimm continued, I verbally took the reporter to task. Yeah, that's called assault. Because I expect a certain level of professionalism and respect. This ego. The FBI, you've got to respect me. The Marines, you've got to respect me. The congressmen, you've got to respect me. It's all about ego. These men are not worthy of our respect. I verbally took the reporter to task and told him off because I expect a certain level of professionalism and respect, especially when I go out of my way to do a reporter a favor. I doubt that I'm the first member of Congress to tell off a reporter. I'm sure I won't be the last, end quote. You didn't tell him off. You threatened to kill him. You threatened to break him in two. You threatened to throw him off the balcony. This man needs to be in jail. He needs to be thrown out of Congress. Capital New York reports that the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee has begun circulating copies of the video. New York One's political director, Bob Hart, issued a statement of his own following the incident. The New York One family is certainly alarmed and disappointed by the behavior of Representative Grimm and demands a full apology from him. This behavior is unacceptable. It's not that it's unacceptable, it's illegal. It's immoral. It's wrong. Even in a country that doesn't have laws against assault, threatening to harm people, it is wrong to do so. You know, I have been an advocate for using words and for not being violent. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of nonviolence. But having the courage, the wisdom, to wield words wisely. This man, Grimm, is the antithesis of that. If I'm right, he's wrong. If it's more important for us to communicate intelligently, to provide evidence and reason, to expose and condemn those things that are harmful, as opposed to breaking them, killing them, harming them physically, one of the two of us is right, the other is wrong. We stand at opposite ends of the spectrum on this. Now, when we return, I'm going to share a little bit more about Mr. Grimm's prior outbursts, because I think it's important that you know that this does not stand as an isolated incident. From there, we're going to talk a little bit about the federal government acting badly over a long period of time. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We're talking about Republican Congressman Grimm. Earlier this month, his former girlfriend was arrested for campaign fraud. She, through a number of fictitious donors, made large campaign donations to the congressman's campaign. But I want to make this point before we listen to Glenn's comment on this incident. What he essentially represents is not an isolated situation. This attitude that the rules don't apply to me, this egotistical belligerence, this threatening approach to others, it's indicative of Congress, of the Senate, of presidents, of the FBI, of many other federal and state agents, even of the military. The rules do not apply to me. They claim in their egotistical and belligerent, threatening tone. Before we consider prior outbursts of Mr. Grimm, I'd like to welcome Glenn to the program. Hello, Glenn.
Oh, yeah. I agree with what you said so far, except, and I was going to say that he may have indeed have felt ambushed or sandbagged, by the guy going off topic, and it depends. A lot of times you'll hear these stories about journalists who you'll hear people complain that they'll have people when they discuss in advance something that they're going to discuss in an interview or an appearance on the show, and then somebody will bait and switch in an ambush. And Well, and I don't know that that occurred here at all. But even if it did, the question is, what would an appropriate response to that be? And one might be irritated, annoyed, or even angered. But then the question is, what do you do with your anger? Having thought over that topic myself, I've often thought I would just sit there right in front of the cameras and say, Mr. Reporter, you and I sat down and discussed our agenda for this appearance, and the topic clearly wasn't on it.
Yeah.
So you clearly thought that you could get me in front of the cameras and then embarrass me. So no, I'm not going to answer that.
Yeah. Let me address these points that you raise because they are valid to a point. And I have personal experience, lots of it, of being interviewed by the media. I have an extraordinarily low regard for the media. First of all, there is never an excuse for assault, which is threatening a physical harm to an individual, unless the individual who is pronouncing the assault has been physically assaulted by the person that they are addressing. So he was not physically assaulted. He was not physically battered, and therefore his response, which is that the threat of violence against another is criminal. It's never excusable.
Absolutely.
So let's put that to rest. First of all, the man should be locked up. And he should be tried, and it'd be a open and shut case because he is filmed threatening to kill another individual. Now, as it relates to being blindsided by the media, having a pre-arranged discussion with the media on topics that will be asked. Those are really two different issues. One is not trusting the media, and I can tell you that there are some subjects that I have some expertise. And in those subjects, when I read a news report, what I find is that the facts are misrepresented the vast majority of the time. And the conclusions are almost universally errant on topics that I know far better than the journalist knows when I read a news story. I have been interviewed countless times. It's in the many thousands, and I can tell you that that journalists are typically ill prepared to interview those that they conduct these discussions with because they don't know enough about the subject, and they're mostly trying to create embarrassment. And they will very often misrepresent facts in doing so. And then what I find is that when they go back and they actually print their story or publish their story, and whatever media they use, they often misquote the individual. They usually will take that individual out of context, which will give an entirely different spin on what was being said. And so journalists are very prone in this country to mislead and to misrepresent. We'll return to Shattering Myths in a moment. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We're reviewing the outburst of Republican Congressman Grimm at following the State of the Union address, and the purpose of the presentation was to emphasize this tendency of elected officials and of those authorized agents of the government, whether they be military or police, acting belligerently, acting in a way that shows that they don't think the rules apply to them, that they're somehow superior, that they have authority over the public, and that this tendency was manifest in the President's State of the Union address, where he was going to bypass Congress. Now, he didn't have to work with them. He could be a dictator if he wished to be. It's embedded in the thought processes of Congress they don't have to use the same Social Security system that the rest of us do. They've got a government pension. They don't have to use the same health care system that's imposed on the rest of us. No, they have their own. They're all special. The rules don't apply to them. And that's the principal theme that I want to communicate. But Glenn brought up some good questions, and it happens to be something that is near and dear to me, and was talking about the relationship between the media and politicians and whether or not Grimm might have had some justification for feeling blindsided. But, you know, Glenn, his ex-girlfriend had been arrested 2 weeks before by the feds on campaign fraud relative to his campaign. 2 weeks before, his former girlfriend arrested for her acts regarding his campaign. You know, that's not exactly being blindsided. That's not exactly a skeleton lurking way back there in your closet. This was January 10th when his former girlfriend was arrested for her behavior relative to his campaign. Now I'm going to tell you, Glenn, you may know, you know that I do this show under an alias. I do it under Yahowah, and I do it under the alias of Yahowah because I don't want people looking at me as if I have something to offer. I really would prefer people do what you do. Listen to what we talk about. Consider the evidence. Analyze it, and consider its importance to them and to their families. And yet, I actually do have a name. I have been on the front cover of a national periodical. It happened to be Business Week, and the article that was written, I think it was 14 pages. There was almost nothing that was true. There were 70 deliberate errors, and they weren't errors. The reporter knew the truth. There were 70 misstatements, factual misstatements, from which erroneous conclusions were drawn from the erroneous statements that were absolutely heinous as to what Business Week published. And in this particular case, I was told that when I sought legal action against Business Week for the knowing fraud that they perpetrated, I was told that because the article covered my life as a public figure, because I was the head of a corporation, that I had absolutely no chance whatsoever of prevailing in a libel suit against them, because even if they knew what they wrote at the time was false, it didn't matter. Didn't matter.
Well, yes, sure. Like Alex Jones, for example, as a frequent interviewee, often talks about his experiences with the media, and Jeff France, as a former TV journalist, laments the lack of ethics in the profession. Now, this guy Grimm is undoubtedly a reprehensible, hyper-aggressive bully. Okay, he's probably guilty. That's one reason he bristled, even if he were sandbagged. There are no good guys in this situation, only a lesser evil, in which case it appears to be the journalist.
Yes.
And, Grimm sought to bear the sword as a military man. He sought to bear the sword as an FBI agent, and then finally realizing that the pen is mightier than the sword, he sought to wield the pen as a legislator. He's a power monger and a megalomaniac, obviously.
He is. And he is a product of the FBI. He is a product of the mindset of the U.S. Marines. He is a product of the new mindset of Congress. He represents what's wrong in these institutions. He is not alone. None of these guys think the rules apply to them. None of these guys think that they all think that they're above the people. They all speak down to the rest of us.
Two shining examples, of men with some, Ron Paul and people like that. There are, Cynthia McKinney, and we've had some good people. A couple.
I'm not a universal advocate of Ron Paul, but I would agree with you that when we use the term all, I'm using the term the same way Yahowah does throughout his Torah, prophets, and Psalms. When Yahowah uses all, speaking speaking of human political and religious malfeasance. He means that it's the overwhelming preponderance.
Yeah,
Really is a really good topic.
Right.
Now, by the way, the reason I'm not universally supportive of Ron Paul, and Ron Paul is really twofold. One is that Ron Paul is the most articulate advocator of libertarianism. And if I were political, I would be a libertarian. I'm not political, so I'm not a libertarian. But if I were political, I would be a libertarian. I think Ron Paul's comments about the world upheaval, particularly in the Islamic countries today, is incredibly naive and disingenuous.
Right. And even if I wouldn't agree with his economics, he's a humanitarian, he's a doctor, he gives a hoot. Yeah,
and I support his comments regarding the Federal Reserve and what an enemy it is of our country. But the fact that you can then align yourself with Republicans who are no better than Democrats, that's troubling to me. So, I see lots of hypocrisy there. But nonetheless, your point is correct that I'm using all in the overall sense.
No, I wasn't mincing words on that, but I know what you mean. But I mean, this guy is obviously, like you said, should be locked up. He's nasty. And then, he talks about the other guy being a man. Well, his demeanor doesn't exactly exemplify what I consider to be a real man.
No,
a real man doesn't need to overcompensate that way.
No, if we are trying to express the best of humanity, then we're going to wield words wisely. We're going to present our words, and when my wife and I were trying to raise our children, who are now grown, but when we were trying to raise our children, and children will sometimes lash out and be frustrated, and they will, they'll swing their fists or kick their legs, or they'll smack their brother, or they will, they'll do some things that, just kind of act out, particularly boys, aggressively. And our constant instruction to our children was to use your words. Use your words. If you cannot convey what is troubling you, what your concern is using words, then you ought to rethink your position. Use your words. And that has really been the basis of this program. I take some very aggressive stances against the Christian religion, against the Islamic religion, against the Jewish religion, against the religion of socialist secular humanism, against the U.S. government, against the U.S. military, and against the U.S. intelligence agencies. But I make it very clear that I don't want anyone picking up a gun or a bomb and to go after any of these institutions. I want others to prepare themselves so that they can wield words intelligently and use evidence and reason to expose and condemn what's wrong with these human institutions. And the moment we turn to violence or the threat of violence, which is what Grimm did, then we lose all credibility, and we're no better than those that we're opposing.
Right. If you just threatened to throw me off the balcony, I think I said, go ahead, because I'm anticipating that I would not die. I'm not quite sure it's high enough to kill you if you even try to land right, unless you smack your head. But then, boy, you really got him by the shirt tail end.
I'm going to break you in two, and I'm going to throw you off the balcony. I've been on the floor of the U.S. Congress, and I can tell you that if you were to pick somebody up and throw them off that balcony, and they were to land, it'd be landing over the backs of wooden chairs and the like, probably going to die. If not die, they're going to be seriously paralyzed. Yeah. If they're broken in two, of course, they are going to die. It's a criminal act. It's a felony.
At least engraved on my tombstone, he was in the right.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it is. Overall, this whole attitude and what took place there, and the fact that he's not in jail, just speaks volumes about what's wrong with our country, and this belligerent attitude. And it strikes me too that it's similar to the attitude of so many Americans of when 9/11 happened. We could have won the war against Islamic terrorism if we had used our words instead of using bullets and bombs. We made Islamic terrorism far worse by using bullets and bombs, by the threat of force and the use of force, when we could have resolved the issue with words. It's a tragedy that so few people are using words wisely, and that has been the whole focus. That's the purpose of this program.
Yeah, the one difficulty in waging InfoWar and, using words is that, in this world, the enemy will, as you said, we've seen how unjust and deceptive, manipulative, and illogical. If you're dealing with someone, if you're in a debate forum full of smart people with, arbiters and Robert's Rules of Order and stuff, certainly you can prevail. But in a world of deception and misrepresentation, it can be hard to win even with words, even if the pen is mightier than the sword.
Okay, that's a extraordinarily valid point. What Glenn has said is something that I experienced a lot of. When I first began to do media interviews, and I've done 3,000 hours of talk radio interviews where I have been the person being interviewed, what I learned, particularly when debating Muslims, is that the vast preponderance of those in the audience were ill-prepared to even witness a debate between a non-Muslim and a Muslim. And the reason was they were not properly informed. They were also not trained on the rules of rhetoric, of logic, and of irrational arguments like straw man and red herring, begging the question. And so you have to spend the majority of your time educating the audience and teaching the audience the rules of rhetoric. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We're in the midst of an interesting discussion that has grown out of criminal behavior of a U.S. congressman, a Republican congressman from New York City, Congressman Grimm. And the point that I was making was challenged by Glenn, and smartly so. My response is that, or my point was, that America has become a nation that threatens and who batters. We are impressed with our shock and awe and our execution of military force and military might, and our first responders, our police that now are so demonstrable in their SWAT teams, and that my preference is to use our words, to wield words wisely. And what Glenn said is that, debate is tough in this country now. In fact, it may even be a non-starter because of the fact that the audience isn't properly informed and they aren't properly trained. They don't know the rules of logic, and they don't know enough about the subject to be able to be witnesses to a debate and benefit from it. Now, Glenn,
but then it's precisely those types of people that end up goose-stepping.
That is correct, because they're so easily misled. Presidential debates in this country aren't debates, but the shows began with Kennedy and Nixon. Nixon was smarter than Kennedy. Nixon was better prepared and better informed than Kennedy, but Kennedy looked he was more articulate and he was more handsome, and therefore the American people who were not well informed and were not exercising the rules of debate and logic preferred Kennedy over Nixon. This goes back a long time. We have a story in the Torah, Prophets, and Psalms of two individuals, one of whom was, I think, the single most brilliant human who ever lived. His name is Dode. He's been misnamed David. And the Israelites wanted a king to be over them. Dode, David, and Shaul, whom they chose, became absolute foes. They were the different sides of this choice. The reason that the Israelites wanted Saul, is because he was big, he was strong, and he had a booming voice. And same reason that, Americans said, boy, that Kennedy, boy, he's handsome. Boy, he talks talks in a way that's appealing to us. And so style has trumped substance. And so then you get into a situation, you say, all right, that being the case, that debate over issues is ineffective in the country because of the dumbing down of the people. And the fact that rhetoric is something that is no longer taught. In fact, you have many times called and mentioned the fallacy of logic that was being deployed in an argument, and so you are a student of rhetoric. I was a student of rhetoric in school. The question then becomes, Glenn, what do you do? Your choices are to, since words in a debate format don't resonate with people, you can do what this politician do. You can threaten people into compliance, which is what our government is doing. Or you can say, since the other option is just to let them all be, just to ignore them all and pretend that they don't exist, maybe it's worthwhile doing a show like this. Maybe it's worthwhile conveying what you learned and publishing it for free for people on the internet and say, I'm going to try to provide some insights. I'm going to try to share some insights with people, and perhaps we'll find enough people this will resonate with.
Well, just as one might elect to go down swinging physically in a fight,
right.
one may, I think the best example, the best Old Testament example I love is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, up against the superior corrupt power. Our God is able to save us from your fiery furnace, but even if he does not, yet we will not, acquiesce. We're not going to give in to you. And, it's like, God is able to change things. He's able to save us. But even if he doesn't, we're still going to do what's right and take a stand. And that's fine. And remembering that Yahweh is getting unto himself a remnant, he's not redeeming the whole.
That is correct. And we'll talk about God's desire to save us from ourselves, from human institutions, from these very brutes, when we return to Shattering Myths in a moment.